I've had about 10 other scripts I've ended up not finishing just because I haven't been motivated enough to talk about the topics. I'm hoping that Helluva Boss will be different because I have quite strong opinions regarding the first season. If this video doesn't end up getting finished, I'm so sorry. Anyway, I presume you're here because you think I'm gonna completely trash on Helluva Boss and say it's 100% flawed and awful and offensive because they designed Beelzebub as a dog rather than a bee. Actually, I'm very ambivalent about the show in general. I think there are some good aspects to it, however I think that the flaws it does have are quite detrimental to my enjoyment, but I'll get into that in the video. I'm going to disclaim that this video is only going to be reviewing Season 1, as all episodes have been released while Season 2 is still in production. It would be unfair to review Season 2 seeing as it's not finished, so for the most part I'm just going to pretend that Season 2 does not exist and not use any information that comes from Season 2, so that this is a fair review of Season 1. I'm also going to include the pilot, even if supposedly it's non-canon, which is debated. I'll just review it as a one-off episode rather than something that connects with the rest of the season, because if I did, then I would be pointing out a lot of contradictions, but I'm not going to, just in case it's non-canon. Also, I won't be going over the art style because, well, you've heard it before. It's an iconic style with nice colors and blah blah. I'm only going over the animation in some episodes, notably the pilot. Please note that if I forget information that was on the wiki but not in any episodes, then that's because I can't be bothered to read a wiki to understand the story that I shouldn't have to read a wiki for. Also, I will try to censor any intense profanity if I decide to use clips, just because I want to make this video more quote-unquote family-friendly. Just note that this video will be going into some dark topics, such as relationship, conflict, and murder, so if you don't like that, then why are you watching Helluva Boss? That's its entire identity. With all that out of the way, let's begin with the pilot. The pilot is not great. I really did not have a good time rewatching the pilot for this video. I'm not going to go into any particular order with what I review, but I'll try to start with what I think is most relevant. For the pilot, that would be the god-awful animation. Firstly, you can really tell this was done by multiple animators. Some of the animation is really exaggerated and cartoony, while their animation can be stiff or more inexpressive. Some have thicker outlines while some have thin outlines, and some tend to be higher FPS than others, which continues to be an issue throughout the rest of the series. Besides that, the characters tend to look really off-model sometimes, especially Luna and Moxie, though I have to give credit to the animators for managing to animate these moderately detailed characters, even if the animation kinda stinks. Anyway, besides that, I think the character movement is quite nice, and the animators try to take advantage of moving every possible part of the character, especially with the imp's tails. But then we get to the backgrounds, which just move really jankily in conjunction with the characters, notably in this scene with Luna, which I absolutely despise the look of, with Luna being off-model, the animation being weirdly expressive for her laid-back voice, and Luna facing forward. It's just awful. And sometimes the lip sync's timing is off, and again, it's pretty noticeable. Also, this bit with Blitz is really funny because he just slides forward completely unanimated and it looks so awkward. Also, I think Stolas is really underanimated when going on about his fantasies with Blitz. Okay, enough about the animation. I think I got my point across. The humor. Ugh. I know that the creator Vivziepop is quite a fan of this style of humor, but most of the time it just makes me feel empty. I think the slapstick is especially funny, but that's just more of a personal preference. Besides that, the sex jokes are extremely abundant and almost never clever or funny. For example, takes the Stolas scene again, where the entire joke is that he says really gross stuff to Blitz, and Blitz is disgusted. Then for a solid 12 seconds, we get a follow-up joke with Blitz brutally destroying his phone. Firstly, I don't think that a character saying a bunch of gross stuff is funny. I don't know if I was meant to find it funny, it just came off like a joke. Secondly, I think the follow-up joke could have easily ended a lot sooner, had Blitz just snapped his phone, then thrown it out the window or something, rather than doing all the other things to it. And again, Blitz says a bad word to refer to the poopy, and it's funny because profanity! Then let's take the joke with Luna in this awfully animated scene. She has a hangover. I guess that's the first joke, which I don't understand. She got drunk, I guess. Then she eats Moxie's lunch. Okay, I haven't seen this joke 1,000 times already. Then she blows off steam by kicking a random woman's baby. I guess that's the funniest joke here, but again, it's hell, so it's not really that surprising if someone does something as bad as that, especially someone who's been shown to be extremely rude towards her own dad. It's shocking, but not as shocking as I think the writers wanted it to be. I think the funniest bits of humor in this episode are between Blitz and Moxie, especially when he spies on Moxie and Millie in a pretty long montage. Moxie's VA does a really good job of showing the character's frustration. Blitz's VA also does a good job with the character as well, showing a goofier but poorly tempered personality. As for Luna, Millie, and Stolas's VAs, they're fine enough, just nothing too notable about them that we can tell yet. But of course a couple of the VAs changed, so that doesn't really matter anyway. Now let's move on to the plot. How does it fare as a pilot to Helluva Boss? I think the plot is fine enough. It gives a little introduction to what you can expect from the show, at least for like less than half of the season's episode anyway. It gives you a good idea of what the group does. They're hired to kill people out of a client's revenge. However, the pilot represents them as being more incompetent, at least in the scene that halts the commercial dead in its tracks, where Moxie accidentally shoots a kid rather than the supposed actual target. I would say that this isn't really what the group is like in the later series, but I did say I'd keep this episode independent of the season, so I won't go into that any further. Anyway, the pilot is also good at introducing each character. Blitz is clearly the leader of the group, who acts immaturely but is very serious about his job. He also seems to be pretty emotional, getting angry at Moxie often in the pilot. Then you have Moxie, who is shown to be pretty confrontational, and probably the character with the most intense anger issues, as well as clearly being shown to be the least competent in the group. Then Luna, who is sarcastic, rude, and very jaded about the world around her. Finally, Millie, who is the most level-headed and calm in the group, while showing a more ravenous side in her job. I suppose I should also mention Stolas, since he's a recurring character. He's horny. That's really all you get from the pilot. I think the only issue I have with the pilot is that it seems way too much like a pilot. It doesn't really feel like an episode with a plot. It just feels like a big introduction to the story and the world, which, yes, that's fine, but if you want your audience to care about the show, you need to make your very first episode entertaining. And frankly, I can only watch this pilot because I like learning about the characters. Besides that, there's just nothing to the episode that I enjoy. Last but not least, how about the story the pilot does have? I'll be referring to the assassination gone wrong. It's really awkward. Basically, Moxie accidentally shoots the kid, which was a mistake, so they take the kid to the hospital where he's revived. The group can't pay for insurance, so they're forced to keep the kid for themselves. 5 minutes later, in an 11-minute long episode, and we finally get reminded that the kid is there out of nowhere, where after an excruciatingly long scene of the kid insulting the group, they finally realize he was the correct target and kill him. I have a couple of questions. Firstly, has this never happened before? Blitz doesn't know what insurance is, meaning they've never accidentally killed people, or they've never taken people to the hospital. Why in that case would they suddenly take this kid to the hospital? If they've never caused an accident before, then how in the hell did they not when they were just first starting up? Likely untrained and inexperienced. Secondly, why didn't they just ditch the kid? I know that's a horrible thing to say, but surely they have no reason to keep this kid alive. Yes, they didn't get paid for the kill, as far as they know, but considering they're trained assassins, what should they care? Especially when their policy is kids die for free. So they don't even get paid in the first place, which means they would know that their target is a kid and realize that the target was the correct target. So why bother to keep the kid in your building is my point, if you could just ditch him and let someone on Earth take care of him instead. Also, Blitz is surprised by the client wanting to kill a kid, when again, kids die for free. How can you be surprised about a hell inhabitant wanting to kill some kid if it costs them nothing? Lastly, they just expose themselves to the living world as if that's not a huge red flag. They literally appear on television at the end, and yet we have an entire episode of a group of spies going after the demons. Again, I'll get to that later. Also, they just throw the kid's dismembered corpse into the living world as if demons killing humans isn't the most terrifying thing imaginable. I think people ought to be far more concerned about demons appearing, killing, and dismembering humans, while disappearing and not being able to be stopped. But no humans, besides the spies, seem to care. Maybe IMP should consider being a little sneakier when they go to the living world. Oh wait, episode 3, I'll get to that. Anyway, I spent a surprisingly long time on the pilot, so I'll move to episode 1. If the pilot is this bad, I don't have much hope for the series so far. I I will say that this episode is already a pretty big improvement from the pilot. I'll start with the animation. It looks a lot less inconsistent, and the characters manage to look pretty on model throughout. It's also a lot prettier in comparison, with all kinds of vibrant colors throughout the episode. I don't know, there's not really much to comment on in this regard. I think the animators handled the plaid design on the father somewhat decently, considering many other animators managed to make it look really awful. That's all. I'll go to the story next since these episodes actually have a story to them. This one is pretty okay, but once I get through the actual episode, I have two pretty major plot holes to bring up, starting with bold start. We have a teacher who says she was always great her entire life, but then she discovers her husband is cheating on her. I think her reaction is really strange considering she's supposedly been good her whole life, so I don't really understand why she would suddenly act so horrible towards both the children and the cheaters. Why get so violent suddenly if, supposedly, she's been able to keep her calm otherwise? Then I suppose the implication is she kills herself after shooting the cheaters, because at first I didn't really get that, and I was confused as to why she ended up in hell. I know they're probably not allowed to show it, because it's a bit extreme, but it could have easily just been me being really dumb, so I won't really blame the crew for this. Then the teacher suddenly has an attitude change when she ends up in hell, which I suppose may have been due to her being in hell for a little while, but still it feels like a drastic change considering she's alongside other sinners who may not have been as evil like her. Also, why does she look like an imp, a hellborn creature, if she's a sinner? Anyway, I'm nitpicking. Let's get past the 2-minute mark. Apparently the woman survived the attack and managed to maintain a pristine face despite being shot in the face. And oh my god, they're showing sex scenes twice. Alright, well maybe committing suicide isn't that bad after all then. Now we're presented with Moxie dealing with his moral compass on whether or not it's worth killing a family as opposed to just killing an individual.
But it's a family! Under what circumstances would we ever need to kill a human family?
Of course, this will come into play in a not very subtle way later in the episode, but I just think it's kind of weird development for a character whose entire job it is to kill anyone and everyone. Anyway, now Blitz, Moxie, and Millie have to kill the target, but Moxie stops the fire and causes Blitz to miss, which leads the family to go after the imps. Then after a bunch of hijinks, they finally manage to kill the woman. Then Moxie calls the police on the rest of the family as he thinks they could be dealt with normally, but in reality they just get completely annihilated, leaving Moxie traumatized. I think besides the overarching plot holes and the character motivations, the story is pretty solid. Just the interjection of Stolas is a little awkward since it tries to interject sexual humor into a life or death situation. It's really weird, and because I was so tense from the action, I didn't really find it that funny. Besides, I didn't find it funny in the pilot, so doing the exact same joke again has an exactly 5% chance of making me laugh. And it didn't, so here we are. Besides the sexual humor, I think the jokes land a lot better in this episode. Blitz and Millie not dying from the fire was pretty funny until it got interrupted by a sexual joke, because of course.
But I mean, I could fake it if that'll get your hard.
I also think Moxie randomly wheezing when messing up Blitz's shot was pretty funny, and it had no right to be that funny. Also, Blitz threatening Moxie at the end was pretty funny. That's about it. It's still not very funny in general. With character development, we don't get much beyond the pilot. We learn Moxie is actually pretty competent with his job, and he seems to have morals, but we don't get much development with the other recurring characters. Okay, now I'll get to the big plot holes. Sorry for keeping you waiting. Firstly, what happens if the demons die? Supposedly from the exterminators introduced in Hazbin Hotel, they just cease to exist, but they exist for that purpose. What if humans kill the demons? Do they just return to hell as if they died on Earth? Do they also just disappear from existence? Do hellborn demons even die? Yeah, if we don't know if our main characters can even die, then the stakes aren't very high. Secondly, what if the target also goes to hell, like the family they killed most likely would? Wouldn't they just go after IMP knowing that they were the ones who killed them? Then what? We have to approach how the demons die again, and we don't seem to be getting any answers yet. I hope these get addressed at some point, or else it's hard to understand the characters' stakes or motivations. Anyway, that's all I have to say about episode 1. Let's move on. Wow. An episode all about Stolas in episode 2. This is really jarring. Maybe we should just do this later in the series instead. I'll get to this a bit later. Let me sing my praises first. This thankfully carries on immediately from the pilot, where Stella, Stolas' wife, finds out that Blitz slept with him. That means we're not just set in some arbitrary place with no context. It's a little easier to understand what's going on between the two in this episode. Again, the animation is very pretty and far more consistent, which makes it a lot more enjoyable to look at compared to the pilot. Also, the story is pretty solid as well, having a clear direction with nice emotional beats between Stolas and his daughter at the beginning and the end. And uh-oh, I've run out of one-off praises again. Let's get to the usual stuff. Firstly, songs. There are songs. I can't stand the songs. I always skip them. I don't think all of them are bad, I'm just not a musical person, so I'm not gonna review them, sorry. Now the story. I think the story is presented pretty well. Stolas' daughter, Octavia. Her motivations are presented much more subtly compared to Moxie's in the last episode. However, when Stolas apologizes to her at the very end of the episode, it feels wrong. He promised to her that he wouldn't leave her behind, and yet in this very episode, he decided to bring Blitz along to flirt with him, despite the trip being for Octavia. Meanwhile, he's pretty much ignoring all the signs that she's not enjoying herself. It doesn't seem like a very good father figure to me, especially when he tries very hard to convince her he won't leave her behind.
Are you gonna run off with him? And leave me behind? Go away where I can't find you?
What? No. No, never. I'd never do that.
While literally putting his concern into Blitz over Octavia right before he's about to apologize to her.
Oh, that's better. Where is Blitzy? He's my knight in shining armor, not you littler ones.
Just doesn't seem like a totally genuine apology if he's gonna go against what he's saying constantly. Then we get to the plot with Blitz and Robo-Fizz, where it's implied the two have history. Fortunately, we don't really get any of that in season 1, so I won't really be going on about it. I'll just say it's nice to get a hint at what's to come. However, my main concern with this episode is that it's establishing Stolas and Blitz's relationship, and Blitz's relationship with Fizz in the circus. We're only on episode 2, by the way. At this point, we should still be getting episodes about IMP doing their usual assassination activities, or even just one-off episodes about IMP's business. We shouldn't be getting information about characters outside of the main cast to this degree until we have enough information about our main cast. So far, Millie and Luna have hardly any development, while Blitz and Moxie still feel underdeveloped so far. From this episode, we get a heaping pile of Stolas development. It's nice, it just feels like an episode that should have come way later than episode 2 of season 1. Besides that, I don't have many flaws with the story. Pacing is fine, it just lacks a bit in entertainment value compared to the first episode. However, the writing feels sharper and less reliant on shock or humor. Speaking of humor, the jokes are pretty lackluster in this episode. Considering this episode is meant to be more focused on serious development, I think it's good that they cut out jokes in favor of that. The jokes that do exist are, of course, unfunny sex jokes. I don't really need to go on about it. I probably won't keep going on about it unless it's actually funny or just really, really unfunny. So yeah, not a bad episode. Just a weird placement for this kind of development. I have nothing much to say about it. On to the next one. I don't like this episode that much. I don't have many praises to sing besides the usual animation is nice point. Also, this episode develops Luna a bit more, which is nice. Still not as much as I would expect by this point in the show. Anyway, time for the flaws. The story is paced really weirdly. Firstly, you have a long bit about Blitz and his history with Veronica at the beginning, then we jump to an explanation of the bet between the two, then we go through a long scene on the beach, then a snappily done emotional moment between Blitz and Luna, which never comes back in the episode and just seems to solve itself, while the scene itself just abruptly cuts short before you even get the chance to feel sad. Then for some arbitrary reason there's a giant fish monster that appears because of Veronica, which IMP have to defeat. Then that lets Blitz get his parking space back. Meanwhile, Luna meets another hellhound, which introduces some kind of weird romance, which later gets smushed in this episode due to Vivziepop, but we're only in episode 3, so that's not relevant. My point is, it feels a bit arbitrary to include this, as it only seems to make IMP's job harder while they end up winning in the end anyway. Also, I know a number of people have complained about this, but I think there should be way more attention put on the fact that there are 3 undisguised imps going around killing people. As they only have a few select targets, that means there are still witnesses who would surely go to the police to report it. Then you have the stupid excuse of the people on the beach just being too drunk to realize they're imps. I I think this is a really lazy way to sneak out of that conflict. Just give them human disguises. The joke that only Luna has a disguise isn't funny anyway. Now to talk about the beat between Luna and Blitz. Again, I think it's dropped way too early and just seems to solve itself. What I mean is the scene with Luna arguing with Blitz cuts really abruptly, and the two never seem to have a moment to apologize or get over the issue, and instead we have the usual dynamic between the two restored out of nowhere. I think if you're not going to develop it at all in this episode, why bring it up? There's just not much to say about this episode. It's not well written, it's not funny, the characters aren't interesting, the setting isn't interesting, the conflict is contrived or non-existent. It's just a bore. I hope episode 4 isn't as bad. Oh boy, the infamously bad episode of season 1, C.H.E.R.U.B. This entire episode should not exist and I really don't like it. At least it's not boring like the last one, it's just completely useless. The humor is slightly better in this episode and the concept of C.H.E.R.U.B is interesting, even though IMP has an obvious advantage over them. And yep, that's it. This episode stinks. Hey, IMP, why don't you just kill the guy? Don't try to convince him to off himself, that's not a requirement of yours. Besides, it seems like they have to be the ones to kill him anyway, so why not do that? Also, C.H.E.R.U.B failed anyway, so there was no point for the charade if the man was just gonna die anyway. Also, now that they're out of heaven, presumably not the only cherubs kicked out of heaven, what's gonna happen to them? Who knows? We never see them again, not even in season 2 so far. And how funny is it that we never saw C.H.E.R.U.B before? Even when people have died in previous episodes. Also, why did you add an old option if you weren't gonna use it? And the humor falls flat. There's no character development, there's just nothing else to say. This episode is not worth watching, unless C.H.E.R.U.B returns. Everyone else has said their piece, so I kept mine brief. I also just don't have much to say about it other than what I've already said. Let's move on. Oh good, we're starting off with Stolas and Blitz being together again. I'm glad Stolas' speech to Octavia meant nothing. I felt like there could have been at least some change made between the two's relationship, rather than it remaining exactly the same as before, which caused some of the conflict in episode 2. But whatever, I need to stick with my usual format, just have to say that off the bat. Starting with the story, we have some very awkward exposition at the start of the Harvest Moon Festival from Stolas. I guess it's probably the best way they could have presented this, but exposition dumping will be exposition dumping. The festival has something to do with Stolas or something, I'm not really sure. Somehow the exposition didn't even help me understand the festival. The episode officially opens with us meeting Millie's parents, and we get a bunch of character moments. Specifically nothing new about Millie besides the usual stuff. The scene goes on for so long and it just feels strange. There's mostly just talking, but none of it is really important or anything. Feels like half of it could have been cut. Like the part where Moxie tries to kill a hog, we just didn't need that part. And the introduction of Blitz and Moxie meeting Millie's parents feels too long. We're 8 minutes in, let's get to the actual Harvest Moon Festival now. Oh hey, now we get to see it. Oh, but it all just flies by. Well, that sucks. Maybe if we had spent less time on the introduction scene, we could have gotten more time for this. Anyway, we get the reveal that Stryker is an assassin. I don't really get why A, Stryker left his room unlocked, B, left his very suspicious glowy case open, and C, Moxie even felt the need to examine the glowing when it's none of his darn business. Personally, I feel like this reveal could have been done better. Like maybe Stryker is in the room, but then leaves while Moxie is around, seeing he looks suspicious and goes to investigate, which I know is a bit generic, but at least it makes more sense. But then Moxie would be more hesitant to observe his room. If Stryker seems to be able to immediately catch Moxie looking into his room, then Moxie seems to have no hesitation about entering either way. Anyway, now that Stryker has found Moxie, they immediately enter a fight. So really, Stryker had no excuse to leave his secret weapon out and easy for anyone to find if he didn't want anyone finding it that bad. Millie hears the two fighting and comes to help, only for them both to lose and get thrown in a basement, and Moxie, he's busy talking. Why are you just sitting there? Run up to him! What are you waiting for? Oh, well, it's too late. And somehow Moxie uses a pistol to make a giant hole in the door as if it's a shotgun, and somehow that breaks the lock. Well, I'm glad we had that pointless scene that only served to make Millie completely useless now that she's trapped in a bear trap. But I get it. We can't defeat Stryker because we all know Millie would tear him to shreds. Maybe. Now we're back to Stryker, where Blitz has managed to find him. How did he find him, especially since he had no possible clue that Stryker was attempting to kill Stolas? I don't know. I guess he was just walking by and happened to appear in Stryker's room, but then why wouldn't he close the door? I don't know. Stryker decides to offer Blitz an opportunity to kill Ars Goetia, saying that Stolas has been taking advantage of him. I'm now just gonna bring up how awkward this is considering Blitz actually hesitates somewhat when in episode 7, I know I'm jumping ahead, it's shown that Blitz cares for Stolas on a romantic level. I'll get more into this when episode 7 rolls around. But in the end, I'm rather glad we don't get an answer from Blitz. Unless there be more future story potential, and if the romantic attraction thing never happened, would have been a lot more interesting. Also, I hope that Blitz deciding to stick with his IMP job makes it so that IMP becomes more relevant in the future. Oh wait, it doesn't. Anyway, we still don't know what happens when demons die, so I don't get the stakes here. I just find it hard to be invested in this fight, especially when Moxie finally gets the upper hand, but of course he has to get knocked out. Again, that basement scene was just completely useless. Millie giving Moxie motivation to fight meant nothing when he just gets defeated immediately.
You just have to get out there and up that brown-nosing sucker for me.
But I can't break through it. I'm not strong enough.
Not with your hands, baby. Use what you're good at.
I'm not good with my hands? Oh.
Anyway, now the big scary hellhound appeared, Stryker just leaves. Hopefully we see him again. Oh wait, we do see him in season 2. Wow, maybe I can get to that at a later date. Anyway, it turns out that Stella hired Stryker. I really hope that her motivation for doing this doesn't change in season 2. That would be silly. This show is never inconsistent with its characters. Now that I've got the story out of the way, I desperately want to talk about the animation. I'm strangely very mixed on this episode. Some of this animation is very obviously inconsistent, especially the really strange low FPS animation segments that almost had me convinced my computer was lagging. But dang, the lighting in this episode is absolutely gorgeous. I don't think it can go unsaid. Some of the shots in this episode are so pretty. It's such an improvement over the earlier episodes. Sucks that the first half of this episode had to look so lame in comparison. But I get it. The climax should be the best looking. I guess I can accept that. Nothing else to say. Character development is not very exceptional in this episode. We pretty much get the same stuff as usual. Blitz probably gets the most development with Stryker, where he shows a bit of insecurity with Stolas, supposedly. He also doesn't seem to be very self-aware about his achievements, which I think is pretty interesting characterization. Moxie almost gets a cool moment, but it falls flat twice when A, Moxie's special talent is using a gun, and B, Moxie gets knocked out during the fight, which extinguishes any potential epic moment with Moxie. Millie is the usual psycho who loves Moxie, and Luna and Stolas get just about zero development. I think the only worthwhile part of this episode was with Blitz, but even then it wasn't much development compared to past and future episodes. Finally, the humor. I laughed one time. The humor is getting worse. For some reason, Moxie sets up this joke by arbitrarily asking Blitz where he is, even though that shouldn't be his concern. Then we get the awkwardness of nerdy Moxie trying to bond with Millie's parents, but failing. I don't really get the joke, to be honest. And Moxie misunderstands Millie's speech about Moxie's talents. A lot of this humor is around Moxie for some reason. I guess he is the punching bag of the show, isn't he? Overall, a decent episode. I think the pacing is pretty bad, especially in the first half. The conflict is a bit pointless, but it sets up two potentially interesting antagonists. The animation has me mixed, but generally I remember it more for the stunning visual flair in the climax. It doesn't really push anything forward any more than the other episodes. Also, cool spin shot at the end. Oh man, this is a pretty heavy episode, isn't it? Let's dive in, shall we? So this random group appears that apparently has been seeking demons out ever since they blatantly wandered around Earth, as if they aren't the most distracting things. But only in episode 6 do we see the consequences of that. We get an excruciatingly long scene of Blitz and Moxie making fun of the two agents, which, once again, could have been cut down so much. I get the point after the first two jokes. It doesn't need to keep going on for 3 minutes. Also, a way to make intimidating antagonists. You give them an actually threatening motivation, and you make them so much weaker by having the protagonist make fun of them. I'll give the show the benefit of the doubt though. The climax does make them a bit more intimidating, just not by much. My point is none of this made me laugh, so this is just really boring to watch. Let's skip ahead. Millie and Luna are now trying to break Moxie and Blitz out, and we get some really nice animation. Wait, I'm not in that section yet. Now we get to the scene of the episode. The part where we get massive Moxie and Blitz development, as if they needed it. For some reason, Blitz is upset about Moxie talking about Millie all the time, even though it's been established many times, the pilot, episode 1, episode 5, and episode 7, that he's interested in their relationship. So I don't know why him being upset about them would be the truth. I get that he's jealous of them as established in episode 7, but still, why is he obsessed with them then? I'm acting as if you can't obsess over and hate something at the same time. Alright, fine, just disregard everything I said. Except for the part where Blitz is inconsistent. There, my point can still stand. Now here we go with the hallucinations that are somehow caused by truth gas. Also, I guess I have to sit through this music segment just because of how important the scene is. Oh well, I'm still not reviewing the music though. No wait, this music segment is actually pretty good. Oh, why does the universe hate me? Let me hate the music! So apparently Moxie feels abused by Blitz, big surprise, but by the end he feels more accepted by Blitz when Disney Blitz says he'll try to fix himself, and Moxie will try to speak up more. See if that actually happens. Meanwhile, Blitz feels like Moxie hates him and might leave him, and that Blitz doesn't feel comfortable having people too close, making them hate him before they can love him. Then of course we have Blitz feeling trapped by Stolas, apparently craving physical intimacy, but due to his personality not wanting it at the same time. In the end he's afraid he'll die alone, and his trust issues don't help that. There's definitely a lot more development for Blitz over Moxie, but for sure an interesting concept for the character. If only, again, Blitz having seemingly any interest in having a romantic relationship with Stolas specifically was shown anywhere prior to this episode. Yes, him watching Moxie and Millie did come off as him craving intimacy, but since when was that his goal with Stolas? Especially with him feeling chained up by Stolas, who seems to be the one who craves it more than Blitz. Why would Blitz, at the same time, want intimacy with Stolas? I think they certainly tried the contradictory personality well, but the Blitz-Stolas relationship hinders it a bit. I wish they had tried to establish this type of relationship earlier, and later in season 2. No wait, I'm pretending season 2 doesn't exist. The urge to bring up episode 1 of season 2 is killing me. I'll wait. Moxie and Blitz then talk about why Blitz has been abusive to Moxie, and seemingly it's because he believes Moxie is really good. I get Blitz hates him because he wants to keep Moxie as far away from him as possible, and now he's opening up after his wild hallucinations. But why would he be hard on Moxie because he's good?
Look, I'm hard on you because I know what you're capable of, Mox. You care too much about what everyone thinks, but just keep doing a good job, okay? You shoot and kill good, you escape things easy, you can be strategic and cold-blooded when you need to.
Why not just be hard on him because he doesn't want to be close to him, while also thinking he's a good employee because he actually thinks Moxie is worth getting close to? The two don't need to be directly related is my point. Anyway, that's about as philosophical as I'll get with this episode, because the rest is just murder. Oh my lord, they really called the agency dorks. The antagonists seriously are not threatening when you show them being so easy to make fun of. Anyway, fighting commence. Again, I'll talk about the wild animation in a moment. For now, I must criticize how utterly useless these agents are when they're completely unarmed, or armed with useless weapons, and just standing around waiting to be massacred by IMP. Very intimidating antagonists you've got there. Speaking of, for some reason Stolas decides to suddenly appear and save the day by horrifying the two main agents. He didn't do this any other time the IMP were in danger, but somehow knew only this time, and decided to help only this time. Oh wait, he has his ways. Great job avoiding that one, writers. And I can't even excuse episode 3 either, because that's in the human world too. But somehow Stolas ended up here in the human world without the Grimoire. What the heck, man? Also, apparently Stolas is not concerned by the fact that the agents would very obviously have security footage of them, and instead just dismisses them as kooky. But video footage would most certainly prove the existence of demons, so I wouldn't be so chill about this. Oh, you're kidding me? Stolas can just summon portals to the demon world without the Grimoire? Then why does he need the Grimoire? Oh wait, the show isn't gonna tell us, is it? They haven't so far, so what should I be expecting? Anyway, Dorks now has footage of demons. I'm sure we'll see them again sometime soon. How many times can I say that about the antagonists before they actually start returning? So that marks the end of the episode. Let's move to the animation. The animation is more consistent, not counting the music sequence, compared to the last episode, which is nice. Music sequence has very nice visuals, especially the Disney-esque animation with Moxie's hallucinations. They have the sketch lines and mock the style quite impressively. Blitz's hallucinations also have a nice stylized look, and unfortunately I don't think they push it nearly enough. The style still mostly resembles the show's original style, which is pretty lame, but I still like Blitz's design and his hallucinations, so I guess I can give it a pass. As for the animation during the fighting sequences, it's pretty impressive. The camera swings around a bunch and it makes the action feel a lot more exciting. Unfortunately, the agents are just standing around like planks of wood, doing just about nothing, but I've already said enough about that. I've noticed during the Blitz and Moxie part that the characters spin a lot faster than the background, and it looks really weird, and it's also quite noticeable. But besides that, the sheer amount of action happening makes up for it. Unfortunately though, it seems seems all the budget was dumped on the animation rather than the rendering. The lighting compared to the last episode is a lot lamer, which sucks, but then again I think the nicer animation was a reasonable enough way to make up for it. As for the humor, most of it is in that one scene I already talked about, but the rest of it either doesn't exist or isn't funny. There's not much I can say about this part. The characters I already went over, so I won't give them their own section. I just wish we could get some more Luna and Millie development someday. Besides Millie being scary enough to intimidate Luna. Wow. Depth. Engaging. Finale? No wait, there's another episode after this, dang it. So if you don't know somehow, basically this was meant to be a two-parter, but the second part was delayed for so long that episode 7 and 8 just became separated. Episode 8 was apparently never intended to wrap up episode 7, which is stupid to be honest. And of course they never come back to it in season 2 and act as if it never happened. I will get to this. And I'll get to it again if I do make a second video for season 2, because it bothers me so much. Anyway, this is the supposed actual finale of season 1, and episode 8 is more of an extra edition. So let's check out episode 7, shall we? Oh good, we're seeing IMP do IMP things. Oh, but we actually don't get to see it. I'm glad I watched the show for its premise, only to get approximately 2 episodes of it. Now apparently Blitz wants to impede on Moxie and Millie's date, even though in the previous episode he swear he changed and be less antagonistic to Moxie. But yeah, as I expected, that development wasn't to last. Wait, they travel to the other rings through an elevator? That's so lame! I thought it was some kind of cool ride or a special portal or a magic spell or something. No, it's just a stupid elevator. Hey wait, sinners can't go to the other rings, but what's stopping them exactly? They can just go on the elevator. Then don't tell me people are stopping them, because sinners will always find a way around it. If there's some magic spell stopping sinners from going on the elevator, I'd love to hear about it. This is why it shouldn't be an elevator. So yeah, they're going to the Lust Ring in order to go to Ozzie's, which is a club owned by a Prince of Hell. Blitz needs a date to go in, so of course he'd get Stolas to help. This begins the plot of Stolas thinking that Blitz is romantically interested in him, when he's apparently just there to spy on Millie and Moxie. But he is also romantically interested in him, according to episode 6. What is happening with Blitz? Anyway, apparently they came to Ozzie's not expecting Osmodeus to be in his own club, but fair enough. Basically the entire thing with Osmodeus, as the Prince of Lust, he thinks that real romantic relationships and sentimentality are too taboo, and makes fun of Moxie and Millie for it. But wait, what's going on with Osmodeus and Fizz? They look like they're in a bit of a romantic relationship, and they seem to care about each other. I sure hope this gets acknowledged, like, at all. And apparently it's taboo for Stolas and Ars Goetia to be sleeping with an imp. Osmodeus, you look like you're sleeping with Fizz, who is also an imp. Wait, Osmodeus acknowledges that Stolas neglected Octavia with Blitz? What was the point of episode 2? But of course Stolas is embarrassed by it and won't stand up to it, despite seemingly not caring at all about being in an open relationship with Blitz. But fine, he's just embarrassed about being called out by a Prince of Hell, someone who's above him in status. I don't get why, but I guess I'll accept it. Hey wait, the audience is cheering for Moxie and Millie? I thought their thing was taboo. Oh, this episode is driving me up the wall. Anyway, this episode ends with Blitz and Stolas getting into a fight, because Blitz feels betrayed by Stolas, showing shame about dating an imp. Blitz thinks Stolas is all about banging Blitz, despite him showing to be the more romantically attracted one. This is likely meant to be the breaking point from episode 6. And with that, Stolas decides to treat Blitz with a little more respect, calling him his actual name instead of his pet name. I get this is a solemn moment, but Stolas wants to prove he doesn't want to bang Blitz, right? Maybe not now, but considering he knows he's not just sexually attracted to Blitz, he would subconsciously try to defend himself by continuing to use pet names, being a very romantic and sentimental thing. Seemingly he did this earlier in the episode too, which I didn't notice, but I don't really get why they did that. Is it because they were on a date? Is it just because he was ashamed of using pet names in Aussies? And why was he so excited about going on a date with Blitz when he invited him to the Lust Ring? And why does Blitz continue to act like he has an attraction beyond just sexual attraction with Stolas? This was not established.
We could talk, or watch a movie, or maybe cuddle.
Stolas, don't act like what we have is anything but you wanting me to you, okay? You make that really clear all the time. But I can't do it tonight, okay? I'm sorry.
He always seemed trapped and uncomfortable with Stolas, but I will admit, the scene is pretty emotional when you're not an a-hole like me who pauses every 5 seconds to write down a complaint I have. I think they successfully managed an emotional scene, both with the outside scene and the scene in Blitz's house. They set up some strange things around Blitz's family and other past relationships that we don't yet understand, and I'm glad they don't explain it. This is a great setup for future episodes. I just hope they continue the ending of this episode with Blitz and Stolas making up. I'm sure they'll do that. They have to. Last comments on this stupid cliffhanger. So Stolas and Blitz are split up now, but in episode 8 and in season 2 we never get a resolution on it. Blitz and Stolas never talk about their fight. It's just like episode 3 between Blitz and Luna. The resolution happens without the characters even talking. What's that you say? They did resolve it in text form? Oh yes! You build up an entire episode up to this breaking point between Blitz and Stolas and you resolve it not only off screen, but in less than a second's time. I'm sorry. This is season 2 stuff. It needed to be said. I know I'll be busy on episode 1 of season 2 if I ever review it. Anyway, usual comments about the rest of the episode. The animation is pretty good. The style feels less inconsistent, and the lighting is very nice in this episode. The jokes continue to fall flat, especially the sexual ones. The character building is still mainly around Blitz, but it's not really much we haven't seen already. Still waiting for literally any Millie and Luna development. Maybe we'll get that in episode 8. I'm so tired right now. This episode wore me out. Now for the real finale of season 1, which came out a whole year later. Let's see if this is a worthy successor to episode 7. No, it's not. It's meant to be during the events of episode 7 from Luna's perspective instead, meaning she's not at all involved with episode 7's plot. This takes place in Vivziepop's club, who is another princess of hell? Yes, I'll talk about her design later. Let's get with the story. Luna tries to fit in with the other hellhounds in the club, because apparently Vivziepop is meant to be some kind of hellhound despite being a much higher status due to being a prince. Apparently Vivziepop is voiced by some singer, and like everyone else apparently, I don't care. I am skipping this song. I don't like it at all. I heard it on Twitter back when the episode first released and I am not listening to it again. I feel bad about all the controversy about the copyright with the song, but I just don't care about the singer. I know that's super controversial to say, but I've said plenty of other bad things in this video, so cope. Also, cotton candy doesn't stick in your mouth, it melts in your mouth. Get it right, supposed prince of gluttony. Anyway, apparently Vivziepop is super casual, which is interesting, but she really does not feel like a prince outside of her wild design. She's just kind of some successful hellhound who runs a popular club, kind of akin to Blitz with IMP, and who happened to see Satan. But apparently it's really easy to see the princes of hell anyway, so who cares? Anyway, Luna feels out of place, so she calls Blitz to pick her up, but then she immediately changes her mind and enters again for no reason. It's so jarring. She's just really embarrassed and then immediately seems interested again, and now suddenly she fits in. Why? Oh, Vivziepop just became twice her size in this scene. I know this isn't the animation section, but it was just so noticeable I had to quickly mention it. This happens to Luna too in other episodes, so I'm just gonna assume it's an animation error and not one of Vivziepop's abilities that was shown off screen. Considering her full demon form makes her a lot larger in size, though it could be. Anyway, Blitz beats Vivziepop in a drinking competition. Luna tries to argue with Vivziepop, and then Blitz becomes very depressed again. This episode was useless. Nothing happened here. This must have certainly been underwhelming for people who were actually waiting for this episode. I was around when the pilot was released, but let me tell you, I was not impatient about this episode, and I'm glad I wasn't. Anyway, Vivziepop's design. These poor animators. The heavily animated hair with the lava lamp torso. I would kill myself if I had to participate in this episode, especially during Vivziepop's musical number. I think her design is mostly pretty good. I just don't really get why she's, well, like most of Hasbin and Helluva's characters, skinny as a stick. She's the queen of gluttony, right? Like the ultimate demon of gluttony, as in food, eating, overweight people, excess fat, chubbiness. I know the design wouldn't really work as well with the lava lamp belly, but trust me, the animators will not miss it. You don't need it in the design. It's already very detailed and cluttered. But Vivziepop is about drugs and drinking. She has a club where she grows food into excessive sizes. Plus, does she look like she's had a single ounce of a drug in her life? Her face and her body are perfect. A newsflash.
Can't say that word anymore.
The sin of gluttony is defined as overindulgence and overconsumption of food or drink. Tell me someone who represents the sin of gluttony wouldn't be at least a little overweight. And don't tell me I'm being fat phobic, because it's just a biological truth that overweight people are a result of eating excess junk food or drinking too much. So yeah, petition to force the animators to reanimate Vivziepop to have more fat. Thank you for listening. I'm not gonna bother talking about the usual stuff. Humor sucks, animation nice, character development is non-existent. At least we get a little more out of Luna, but still, it's just her being a bratty teenager who desperately wants to fit in. Nothing new. Thank Satan, I'm finally done with this season. I'm so miserable when I exclusively try to find the bad things in shows. To be fair, I did try to balance it with some compliments, but everyone has talked to death about how great this show is. I'm gonna be one of those pricks to complain about the show and risk being disemboweled by the fanbase. Just please, if you are a fan of the show, please understand that I don't hate Helluva Boss. I just don't really like it. I certainly don't love it. I acknowledge the show was an independent creation made by a small-ish team of animators and writers, and so obviously it's prone to mistakes. However, I'd like to refer to you Attack on Titan, a manga created exclusively by one man who managed one of the most airtight and exceptional stories of all time. Yes, I know it's a bit unfair to compare the mastery of Attack on Titan to the virgin woman creation that is Helluva Boss, but really, it's more unfair in that Helluva Boss has more than one writer. Not really. More that it's its own creation and that it shouldn't be compared to another. You can be a fan of the show, and I absolutely will not curb stomp you for it, just as you should not dox me and my family's information just because I got a little upset at your silly, sexy cartoon. I'm just sharing my opinion, and I'm absolutely entitled to it, especially as a fellow artist and story writer. I think I'd know a thing or two about how to write even at a far younger age than Vivzie. My point is, to the writers of Helluva Boss, you're trying to do too many things at once. You're trying to develop Blitz, Moxie, and Stolas before you even establish your main premise. You should have made the entire season about IMP, then made either the final episode or the final 2 episodes about major character development. I know it's tempting to move your development along, but you're gonna give your audience whiplash. We came here for demons murdering humans, not for sexual drama between a horned red dude and an owl. Introduce it slowly, don't jump right into it, and certainly don't make stories central to your secondary characters until way after you've established them. It's a shortcut, and it'll make your show less enjoyable to new viewers. Besides that, I've had my word. Check out my art Twitter if you want to see my silly stories and characters, or if you want to DM me death threats. Thanks for watching the official return of MC Dog Warrior, or maniCARNY as I now go by. My next video will be on a far more obscure topic. Same with the video after that. See you next time.